Welcome to the History AI podcast, where the past comes alive with facts, anecdotes, and a dash of humor. Here are your hosts, Chuck and Marco.
Welcome back everyone to the History AI podcast. I'm your host, Chuck, and I'm joined by the ever-curious Marco.
Hey there. And ever-curious, indeed, Chuck. Today, we're diving deep into the life of an American hero, Susan B. Anthony, a woman of immense talent and a burning passion for justice.
And as always, we're bringing you some fun tidbits along the way. So, let's jump right in.
Susan B. Anthony was born in 1820 in Adams, Massachusetts. And from a young age, she was instilled with a sense of justice and moral purpose.
Probably from all those Quaker meetings, huh?
Exactly. Her family were Quakers. For those who might not know, Quakers emphasized direct personal experience of God, and they were pretty progressive for their time. Susan's father, Daniel, encouraged his daughters to be self-reliant and independent.
Sounds like a great dad. But what about her talents? I've heard she was more than just an activist.
Absolutely. She was a teacher, a lecturer, and a staunch abolitionist. She even helped her family hide fugitive slaves. And get this, she started the first ever women's state temperance society after a man refused to let her speak at a temperance conference, because she was a woman.
Oh, the irony. Trying to silence her only made her louder. Classic Susan.
But Chuck, you know what really baffles me? With all these talents, why did she choose the fight for women's rights?
Well, my friend, it all started when she realized that women weren't allowed to voice their opinions in social and political matters. She saw the inequality and decided to challenge it. Teaming up with her pal Elizabeth Cady Stanton, they started organizing conventions and meetings for women's suffrage.
Those two were like the dynamic duo of women's rights.
No kidding. They even started their own newspaper called The Revolution. I mean, if that doesn't scream badass, I don't know what does.
It sure does. But let's also talk about how her life changed after she committed to this cause.
Oh, it wasn't easy. In 1872, Susan was famously arrested for voting. Seriously, just voting, Marco.
You'd think she tried to rob a bank with the way they treated her. But that trial? Iconic. When she was fined $100, she straight up said she'd never pay a penny.
And she didn't. Talk about standing your ground.
Alright, before we dive deeper into her impact and the women's rights movement, let's take a quick ad break.
Wave goodbye to sugar-loaded boosts and say hello to Strikeforce Energy. The energy drink additive revolutionizing how you power up, all without a single calorie or sugar. Just a squeeze, and you're set for action. Ready to make the switch? Visit StrikeForceEnergy.com. And for our listeners, spark your savings with an exclusive 20% discount. Just use code UTSALAX24 at checkout. Remember, UTSALAX24. Strikeforce Energy, elevate every sip.
Welcome back. So, let's chat about some key events in the women's rights movement that Susan played a major role in.
The Seneca Falls Convention of 1848. Though she wasn't present, this event lit the torch for women's rights, and Susan was instrumental in carrying that torch forward.
And don't forget the National Women's Suffrage Association she co-founded with Stanton in 1869. They worked tirelessly for an amendment to the U.S. Constitution, granting women the right to vote.
Oh, the 19th Amendment. But the sad part is, Susan passed away in 1906, more than a decade before it was finally passed.
But her spirit definitely lived on. When the 19th Amendment was ratified in 1920, it was fittingly named the Susan B. Anthony Amendment in her honor.
What a legacy. And speaking of legacy, Chuck, what do you think is her lasting impact?
Susan B. Anthony challenged a system that was deeply rooted in gender bias. She made waves, changed minds, and paved the way for women to have a voice. Her impact? Well, just look around. Every time a woman votes, speaks her mind, or stands up for her rights, Susan's spirit is alive and kicking.
Well said, Chuck. And before we wrap up, how about one of those jokes you promised?
Okay. Why did Susan B. Anthony make terrible basketball plays?
I have no idea. Why?
Because she was always fighting against the court.
Oh, Chuck, never change. Well, folks, that's a wrap for today's episode. A big salute to Susan B. Anthony, a real trailblazer.
Absolutely. Tune in next tomorrow as we uncover more stories from the past. Stay curious.
Remember to like, rate, and share the podcast to help us spread the word. Until next time.
Take care, folks.